If you know me, you know that I am always wearing Skims. For so long, I felt like I was finding myself in a rut with my clothes. I felt like my clothes were wearing me and that I was not wearing my clothes, even down to the bras and underwear that I wore. And what I love about Skims is how every product just melts into your body. And now every morning that I put on my Skims bra and underwear, I am more comfortable and confident knowing that I'm wearing the pieces and not the other way around. Trust me on this, there is a reason that everyone loves Skims. And once you try them, you will never look back. So shop my favorite bra and underwear at skims.com. And after you place your order, be sure to let them know that I sent you. Select podcast in the survey and be sure to select my show in the drop-down menu that follows. Hello everyone, what is up? Welcome back to another episode of Killer Instinct, you guys. Thank you so much for joining me here today. If you're new here, hi, my name is Savannah and I'm your host of Killer Instinct. And before we get started, make sure you go ahead, hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. We post weekly here on the podcast every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. We also upload the video version onto YouTube on Wednesdays as well, so make sure you are subscribed. And if you're looking for more exclusive Killer Instinct content, you can always find that over on our Patreon. We post an additional 3 episodes a month on Patreon and end the month with an exclusive live stream as well. So all the information and details on that can always be found in the description box below for you to check out. Now, before we get into today's case, I do want to take a moment and go over a couple things as far as scheduling and episodes go, what you guys can expect from me over the next few weeks. Now, if you're a Patreon member, then you already know this because we talked about it last week. We talked through it. I saw your guys' comments and I let you guys know where my head was at regarding how things are going to go for the next few weeks. Now, for those who are unaware, I am getting married here very shortly. Actually, I'm getting married in early October. And over the past few weeks, I've really been trying to reflect on how to best put out uninterrupted content alongside everything that I have going on in my personal life right now. Like I said, I'm getting married in early October and then I will be gone for 2 weeks after that for my honeymoon. And as much as I have tried to get ahead of the episodes that I put out on a weekly basis, it truly has been very difficult to do so. If you've ever planned a wedding before, you know it really is like a second full-time job. And when it comes to the episodes that I put out for you guys on a weekly basis, I do hold myself to a certain standard and I want to do every case justice. I want to come here every week and give the victims the respect that they deserve, the respect that their families deserve. And with everything going on right now and everything that's to come, it has been nearly impossible to do so. So with that being said, I've been trying to come up with a solution as to how to fix this. And I think that I have found one, which is what I had announced on Patreon last week. So the solution for this is that for the month of October, things are going to look a little bit different. You are still going to get your weekly uploads every single Wednesday for the month of October. However, the content that you're going to be getting is the content that is over on Patreon. So what that means is that you will be getting episodes that have already been previously posted onto Patreon. I've talked about this on Patreon. The Patreon members know this. And truly for you guys here on Killer Instinct, nothing really changes because you're just getting episodes that you haven't seen before. We do full-length episodes over on Patreon. It's really the same content, just different cases that we're uploading over on Patreon. So for you guys here on Killer Instinct, nothing really changes. For my Patreon members, as they do know this, and I'll repeat it again, I am pausing the subscription for the month of October. So no one is getting charged over there for the month of October because there's going to be no new content uploaded over there. And my Patreon members don't have to do anything. I am the one who's responsible for pausing their subscription, which I will do right before the beginning of October. All of the episodes that are over on Patreon will still be available for the Patreon members to go back and watch. And so for you guys here on Killer Instinct, again, nothing really changes, but you are going to be seeing, you're kind of going to get a glimpse as to what we do over on Patreon. So I will be posting the Patreon episodes over here for those 4 weeks in October. So I wanted to let you guys know about that and have you guys be aware of that, just so you understand, because like I said, I do hold myself to a certain standard when it comes to the episodes that we put out, and I want to do every case justice, and I feel that I have done that when it comes to the episodes on here and on Patreon, which is why I feel confident posting the Patreon episodes for those few weeks in October. So I hope you guys understand. I will remind you guys again next week, just to kind of give you a little bit of a buffer, but I wanted to bring this to you ahead of time. That way you kind of have an idea as to what's going on. So that is my announcement. That is my update for you guys here on Killer Instinct. Nothing really changes because these are episodes that you have not seen before. These are episodes that have not been posted here, but you'll get a glimpse as to what we do over on Patreon on a weekly basis as well. So that's my announcement. And with that being said, let's get into the case that we are here to talk about today. As you guys can tell by the title of today's episode, today we are talking about the senseless murder of Danielle Jones. Now, this is a solved case. However, it is one that's going to leave you with a lot more questions than answers. So with that being said, let's jump right on into it. Danielle Jones was born on October 16th, 1985 in Essex, England, to her parents, Linda and Tony Jones. She grew up alongside her two brothers, Mitchell and Ryan, and for all things considered, Danielle had a very conventional upbringing. She was a happy-go-lucky teenage girl who loved her family and loved her friends, all up until a fateful day in 2001. Now, this case begins on June 18th, 2001, and this day in particular started out like any normal day for Danielle and her family. This was a school day, and typically for Danielle, she left for school 10 minutes before 8 a.m. every day. Leaving those 10 minutes before 8 a.m. gave her a good buffer to walk to the bus stop, a good 10-minute time frame. Now, Linda, Danielle's mother, said that morning she said her goodbyes to Danielle as she normally did. Danielle walked out the door and headed towards the bus stop to go to school. And according to Linda, she said that there was nothing that stood out to her about this morning in particular. It wasn't until she got a phone call from Danielle's school several hours later telling Linda that Danielle had not made it to school that day, and they wanted to know if there was a reason for her absence. Now, Tony, Danielle's dad, he was at work when this phone call came in, and Linda immediately called Tony when she learned that Danielle had not made it to school that day, and Tony immediately came home. Now, when Danielle's family had heard that Danielle had not made it to school that day, everyone was very concerned for a multitude of reasons. First of all, Danielle left her home that day to go to school. She was meaning to go to school that day. Nothing stood out about it. She didn't act like anything was wrong, like anything was out of the ordinary. She left that day as she normally did to go to school, but something must have happened between then and the bus stop that changed everything. And secondly, Danielle was not the type of person to just skip school. That wasn't her. She wouldn't do that. And initially, Linda said that she figured that everything had to be some sort of misunderstanding. She tried to convince herself and Tony that maybe everything was okay. Maybe there was some misunderstanding. Maybe Danielle caught a wild hair and she decided to skip school for the day. However, as time passed and the regular school hours for the day came to an end and Danielle still did not come home later that evening, that is when the panic really set in and Linda called authorities to report Danielle missing. Now, when police arrived to the Jones household, they walked into Danielle's room to see if there was anything missing from her bedroom that could indicate that maybe Danielle ran away. Maybe she was planning on skipping school for a few days. Maybe she went on an impromptu trip with someone. But everything was there and in its place. Danielle had not taken any money. She hadn't touched her clothes, not a phone charger, nothing. Everything was in there. After this, police began searching some of the nearby shops. They searched the train stations. They were looking at surveillance footage, anywhere that Danielle could have possibly gone to give them some sort of answer as to where she could be or what her mindset was, but there was nothing there as well. Police also began speaking to Danielle's teachers and friends, but no one knew where Danielle could have been. And her friends mentioned that in the days leading up to this, nothing seemed out of the ordinary. Danielle did not seem like like anything was off. She didn't make any strange or unsettling comments. Again, everything just seemed normal. Now, about a day after Danielle went missing, so on June 19th, this is when police got their first development in this case, and that was that Danielle's uncle, a man named Stuart Campbell, received a text message from Danielle's phone. Stuart said that when he received this text message, he ran to Tony and Linda with a miraculous discovery. He said, "Oh my goodness, Danielle has texted me." Now the text message read, quote, "Hiya Stu, how are ya? I'm in so much trouble at home right now. Everyone hates me, even you. What the hell have I done? Why won't you just tell me? Text me back, please. Dan." End quote. Now, seeing this message initially, it gave Danielle's family a lot of hope. They figured that maybe Danielle was upset. Maybe she did run away. Maybe this was just something really off the cuff that happened, and maybe she wasn't in any life-threatening danger. However, still, Danielle's family, the more that they looked at the text, they felt like the message was very out of character for Danielle, but given its context, police did run with the theory that maybe Danielle did just run away from home. Now, about 2 days after Danielle's disappearance, police spoke and got statements with Danielle's younger brothers. Now, this is when authorities learned something very interesting in this case. According to Mitchell, Danielle's younger brother, he claimed that his typical routine every morning is that he would sit in the windowsill and watch Danielle walk to the bus stop. Every morning he did this without fail. And Linda said that Mitchell did do that again on this specific morning, June 18th. But according to Mitchell, he claimed that something stood out to him about Danielle leaving for school that day. Mitchell said that he watched as Danielle left the house and walked in the direction of the bus stop, which was her typical route. However, several moments later, he saw her turn around, walk past their home again and in the opposite direction. So instead of just following her normal path, something happened where Danielle made a decision to turn around, walk past her family home in the opposite direction, and keep going. So this was very interesting to authorities because it meant that for some reason that morning, there was something different for Danielle about this specific morning. Whether that something was that Danielle got spooked or something scared her on her normal path, or she decided to turn all the way around and walk past her house in the opposite direction because she was planning to run away and needed to go in the opposite direction. And so for authorities, they were trying to figure out what that something was. Okay, you guys, I'm back to talk about my favorite brand ever. Truly, this is such a pinch me moment when I get to talk about them with you, because if you know me, you know that I am always wearing Skims. And if you also know me, you know that I prioritize comfort over most things in my life. And that goes for everything, all the way down to the intimates that I put on every single day. And luckily for me, and for you, by the way, Skims always knows what they're doing. But are we surprised? Because I am not. For so long, I felt like I was finding myself in a rut with my clothes. I felt like my clothes were wearing me and that I was not wearing my clothes, even down to the bras and underwear that I wore. And what I love about Skims is how every product just melts into your body. And now every morning that I put on my Skims bra and underwear, I am more comfortable and confident knowing that I'm wearing the pieces and not the other way around. I love how Skims has a one-stop shop for everything. Truly, my clothes, my pajamas, my bra and underwear. And have you guys noticed with other intimates brands that the products are either wildly impractical or just incredibly uncomfortable? Whether it be a wire sticking out in some place that it shouldn't be, it's unflattering, it's poking, but that's not the case with Skims. My go-to for years has been their Fits Everybody dipped front thong. This is, I kid you not, you guys, the most comfortable article of clothing that I've ever put on my body, hands down. I swear to you that I have never bought another pair of underwear since trying these, and I don't plan on it. And when I pair it with a bra like the Fits Everybody push-up bra, it's game over. It's done. There is a reason that my entire closet has turned into Skims, and intimates are no exception. It is turned into my staple. I'm being honest when I say I don't own another brand of underwear or bras because truly nothing else compares. Trust me on this, there is a reason that everyone loves Skims, and once you try them, you will never look back. So shop my favorite bra and underwear at skims.com, and after you place your order, be sure to let them know that I sent you. Select podcast in the survey, and be sure to select my show in the drop-down menu that follows. So at this point, police began speaking to some of Danielle's neighbors, and several neighbors made comments that they noticed something different about the morning of June 18th. According to several of these neighbors, they had made comments about a blue van being parked on the side of the road near Danielle's home in their neighborhood. Now, one source even claimed that they had seen someone matching Danielle's description speaking to the driver of this blue van. Now, when police brought this information to Linda and Tony, they asked Linda and Tony if there was anyone in their inner circle or anyone that they knew that was a driver of a blue van or someone that had a blue van. And surprisingly enough, Linda and Tony claimed that yes, they did know someone who had a blue van. And that someone was Danielle's uncle, Stuart Campbell, the same man who claimed that Danielle had texted him just one day after her disappearance. And Linda told authorities that Stuart had picked up Danielle from school multiple times using that same blue van. And so with these connections kind of coming together, with these pieces coming together, police decided to take a closer look at Stuart Campbell and really learn more about who he is. Now, when they did this, police learned that Stuart's connection to Danielle was that he was married to Tony's sister. So he was not directly blood related to Danielle. They also learned that he was a builder, he worked in construction, and that Danielle was very close to Stuart. Their families were very close to each other. Danielle and her brothers loved Stuart. He was always known to be the fun uncle. He would play with the kids. And Linda and Tony said that there were no red flags growing up. However, Linda did claim that when Danielle turned to be around 13 years old, this is when she did notice that Stuart took more of a special kind of liking to Danielle. But again, Linda claimed that it didn't strike her as anything concerning because Stuart was always close with the kids. He was always close with Danielle and her brothers. But as time went on and Danielle was experiencing some more typical teenage behaviors, some teenage tiffs, some fights with her parents, Linda noticed that Stuart always found a way to be Danielle's almost confidant. Danielle's friends also stated that they recognized the closeness between Danielle and Stuart. Now, when police looked into Stuart's criminal record, they saw that in 1989, he was charged with attempted kidnapping of a 14-year-old girl. However, those charges ended up being lessened to taking a child without lawful authority. Now, Stuart was able to convince his wife, which was Tony's sister, that he was wrongfully convicted, that he was wrongfully accused, and he did manage to keep it a secret from the rest of the family. Linda and Tony had no idea whatsoever about this accusation because Stuart was able to manipulate and convince his wife at the time that this charge and that this accusation was just something that he was falsely accused of. Now, after Danielle went missing, there was a woman who lived in an apartment that was located on the route that Danielle would have had to walk to get to the bus. So this woman lived on that route. This woman claimed that on the morning of June 18th, she saw a girl who fit Danielle's description, again, talking to a man that fit the description of Stuart. She claimed that the two looked as if they were arguing, and even more so, the woman claimed that she heard the girl tell the man, "Go away, get away from me, you pervert." Now, Linda and Tony also informed authorities that the morning that Danielle went missing, when Linda and Tony were made aware of their daughter's disappearance, Tony had called Stuart multiple times, or had attempted to call Stuart to see if he had seen Danielle, as they were doing with all of their family and friends. However, Stuart was the only one that was not answering. Tony then went to Stuart's home directly to see if he was there and to inform Stuart as to what was going on. And Tony claimed that when he arrived to Stuart's home and he knocked on the door, he did not get an answer. So he started looking through the windows of the house, and that is when he could see that inside the home, in the living room, there was a camera set up in the living room on a tripod. There was lighting equipment and empty film strips on the floor. Now, Stuart, like I had mentioned previously, he was a builder. There was no need for him to have all of that equipment, studio, camera equipment in his living room. And it was also not something that Linda or Tony was aware of before. So Tony was very confused when he saw this set up in the living room. Tony claimed that he continued continued knocking on the door several times. However, he didn't get an answer at all, so he ultimately went home, but he did tell Linda that he was certain that Stuart was in the house, but simply just not answering the door. He said that he was convinced Stuart was inside, but for whatever reason, Stuart refused to come to the door. So Linda and Tony flagged that to authorities fairly quickly, and because of this, police spent several days then surveillancing Stuart. They were watching his patterns, seeing what his behavior was like, and police did this because they truly believed at this point Danielle could still be alive. There was a lot of suspicion around Stuart and a lot of red flags surrounding him, and police wondered that if Stuart was involved in whatever happened to Danielle, if he was keeping her alive. So they wanted to watch him. They wanted to see if ultimately Stuart would take them and lead them unknowingly to where Danielle was located. However, this is when police had to make a very tough decision because they figured that the longer that they were prolonging an arrest on Stuart, it's possible that the outcome would have been worse for Danielle. They worried that that would be the difference on whether or not Danielle would be alive or dead when they found her. So because of this, on June 22nd, 2001, about 4 days after Danielle went missing, police arrested Stuart Campbell, her uncle. Now, Stuart was brought down to the police station for an interrogation after his arrest, and during this, Stuart denied everything. Now, detectives stated that Stuart just continuously responded with no comment at least 50 times over the span of this interrogation. It was about a 20-minute interview, and over the span of those 20 minutes, he said no comment over 50 times. Now, Stuart did tell police that he had an alibi on the morning of Danielle's disappearance, and he claimed that he was by himself shopping at a Wicks store for building materials. So, police then wanted to obviously check out that alibi. They went to the Wicks store and asked for the surveillance footage, and when they searched through it, they learned that Stuart's car was never seen entering or exiting the parking lot of the Wicks store on June 18th, which left his alibi to be uncredible. Now, while this was happening and while Stuart was in custody, police did simultaneously search Stuart's home. Now, inside of Stuart's home, Stuart had a room that, according to his wife, no one was allowed inside of, not even her. His wife claimed that she was never allowed inside of it and did not know what went on behind that door. Now, police obviously gained access to this room, and when they did, they were horrified at what they saw. Police discovered thousands of pictures of young teenage girls all wearing little to no clothing. It was child pornography, thousands and thousands of pictures. Police learned that alongside being an independent contractor builder, Stuart also had a side business of being a photographer, one that no one was aware of. He ran a business called Cinderella's, where he would photograph young teenage girls. Now, these photos that he was taking, they never went anywhere. They weren't being published in any magazine or for any advertisement. They were simply for Stuart's own sick, twisted mind. He would keep the pictures for himself, and alongside of that, in this room, police also discovered a notebook planner of Stuart's, and when they looked into this planner, they could see that Stuart was taking notes on every interaction that he had with Danielle. He would mark the date and the time of when any interaction would occur. Now, all of these entries were deeply troubling. It was very, very unsettling that Stuart was marking down entries of him and his teenage niece to begin with. It would be odd if Stuart was doing that with anyone. However, there was one in particular that stood out to authorities, one entry that stood out to authorities, and that was on April 13th of 2001, which was a few months before Danielle's disappearance. Stuart had written an entry that stated, quote, "Played some PC games with Danielle and the boys," end quote. The police could see that Stuart had also written in something that he had tried to erase. However, they were able to see that the word that he had attempted to erase was an accident, panic. And again, that was on that same day, April 13th. So he had kept in playing PC games with the boys and Danielle, but he had tried to erase the words an accident, period, panic. Now, police then went to Linda and Tony and talked to them about this specific entry because they found it odd that A, Stuart would write that down in general, but B, they wanted to understand and see if Linda and Tony remembered what could have possibly happened on that day. And when they brought this to Linda, she claimed that she actually did remember that day quite well. Linda claimed that Stuart had picked up Danielle and the younger two boys from school that day, which was normal. This was something that he did often. However, he brought Danielle home individually at one point. Danielle was brought home first by Stuart, and when Danielle and Stuart walked inside, Danielle immediately just ran upstairs and passed by her mom. She didn't say anything to Linda. She just walked straight past her and ran upstairs. Now, Stuart had told Linda that the reason that Danielle must have ran upstairs was because she was embarrassed because Danielle passed out for a short period and had wet herself, which is why she ran upstairs so quickly to get cleaned up. Now, Stuart then left the house and Linda went upstairs to go check on Danielle, and she noticed that Danielle had some markings on her neck. There were some marks on her neck, and Linda initially chalked this up to some heavy necklaces that Danielle was wearing. She thought that maybe Danielle was having a reaction from her necklaces, and it was clear to Linda that Danielle did not want to talk about whatever had taken place. She didn't want to say anything. Danielle was definitely a little bit shut down at that point, so Linda just assumed that it was from the necklaces and really didn't ask any questions other than that. Now, police also spoke to one of Stuart's neighbors about that day, April 13th, and this neighbor claimed that she remembered hearing a voice of a young girl at Stuart's home, and she remembered clearly that she heard a man, who is assumed to be Stuart, saying something to the effect of, "You don't have to do anything you don't want to do." So the neighbor was able to somehow hear tidbits of this conversation between the man that is assumed to be Stuart and a young girl. But again, that was the extent of the conversation that the neighbor was able to pick up. Now, inside of Stuart's home, police also discovered a green duffel bag in the attic, and inside of this duffel bag contained some suspicious items that police knew right away they wanted to examine further. These items included handcuffs, lingerie, and condoms. So red flags just continued to raise for authorities. It seemed that on the outside, Stuart had again presented himself as this fun-loving uncle who loved his family. Everyone wanted to be around him, but the darkness that was beginning to be uncovered underneath the surface was incredibly disturbing. Now, police also got access to Stuart's computer at this point, and when they did, they saw that Stuart had downloaded an application which he thought would wipe his computer history. The purpose for downloading this application was to wipe his computer history. However, police, they have technology that still is able to uncover it. And when they did, they found that in the days leading up to Danielle's disappearance, Stuart was looking and searching at an overload of pictures of young underage girls who, again, had very minimal to no clothing on. So he was looking at a surplus of child pornography leading up to Danielle's disappearance. So at this point, Danielle had been missing for a week, and believe it or not, despite everything that I just named off to you, police did not have enough concrete evidence to charge Stuart with Danielle's disappearance, so they had to release him from custody on June 24th. I am unsure why they were not able to keep him on any sort of child pornography charges because it was clear that he had a surplus of that in his possession, but regardless, he was able to be released on June 24th, and this was a very hard decision for police to make. However, it was one that police had to do because, again, of the lack of evidence that they had against Stuart pertaining to Danielle in particular. However, after his release, police did place Stuart under another 24-hour surveillance, so police were watching and following his every move, and Stuart did exhibit some pretty odd behavior after his release. He had two vehicles. He had a blue van, like I had mentioned, and a silver sedan type car, and police watched as Stuart would drive his silver car around to different shops, parking lots, public areas, and take took pictures of all the other silver cars in the area alongside his. He did this on the street that he lived on as well, and police thought that this was very strange because why are you taking pictures of other people's cars? But police theorized that Stewart was doing this in order to effectively build an alibi for himself. So if police were able to say that a silver car that looked like his was seen at XYZ place, he would be able to say, well, there were a bunch of silver cars, and he would have the pictures to prove it. It just seemed odd, but it also seemed like Stewart was getting a little bit more paranoid. Now, at this point, Danielle's parents began searching through Danielle's belongings themselves at their home to see if there was anything concerning or telling that would arise. And when they did, they discovered a note hidden in Danielle's pencil case for school. It was written on a very small, ripped piece of paper, and it said, quote, "Hi, Princess. I hope you had a lovely day. Text me when you get back. Love you, Stewart." End quote. There was also a second note discovered that read, quote, "Hi, Princess. In case you missed my last note, I thought I'd pop another just to let you know I miss your smile. Kiss, kiss." End quote. Now, these notes are obviously incredibly disturbing. They send chills down my spine when I read them. And just to make matters worse, if you're wondering when Stewart would have had the time to give Danielle these notes, it could have been at any time. It could have been when Stewart had picked up the kids from school. Or what police also learned is that Stewart also had a key to Danielle's family home. He had a key to the Jones household because not only was he family, but he had also done a lot of handyman work around the house, given his builder background. So he had access to that home at any given time, which means he also had access to Danielle's bedroom. Now, over the next few days, there was a massive search conducted to look for Danielle, because as much evidence that is coming forward and as much as the pieces are beginning to come together in this case for authorities, there is still a massive piece of this puzzle missing, which is, where is Danielle? I'm talking there was a 400-person search looking through all the surrounding rural areas around where Danielle was last seen. There was an underwater search in a flooded marsh area in the outskirts of East Tilbury. Police brought in helicopters to search overhead. However, nothing was coming up. There was no Danielle. And pertaining to these searches, something that police were noting is that the only person in Danielle's inner circle who did not participate in any of them was Stewart. Now, police thought that with Stewart's background in construction, he definitely would have had the ability to conceal Danielle's body and dig a grave somewhere that would be difficult to locate. Again, that was a terrible thing for police to even have to start thinking at that point, but when they were thinking about the reality of what could have happened here, they had to think about where Stewart could have placed Danielle. And police were desperate to locate Danielle, as was her family, so they tried everything they could. They even tried to jog the memory of people who could have possibly witnessed Danielle's disappearance. They even went as far as filming a reenactment of the disappearance. They got a girl who fit Danielle's description. They had her dress in Danielle's school uniform, and this brought in a whole new influx of tips and sightings that other people were claiming that they had. Many people stated that they had seen Danielle in their cities or their towns, which also contradicted police's theory, which was that something terrible could have happened to Danielle. This was more so feeding into the theory that maybe she ran away, maybe she went off on her own accord. So there was a lot of pressure on authorities to make sure that they were leaving no stone left unturned. But days, weeks, and months were continuing to pass, and there was no sign of Danielle. And there was also no new suspects that were coming forward. Stewart was still the primary suspect in this case, but he still was not arrested at this point. Now, as the months passed, police began to look into Stewart's cell phone records and discovered that when the supposed text message from Danielle was sent to Stewart, the one that Stewart claimed he received from Danielle the day after her disappearance, the police were able to figure out that both Stewart and Danielle's phones had pinged from the same cell phone tower at the the time that that message was sent, indicating even further that Stewart was impersonating Danielle. He was pretending to be Danielle and sending the text messages to himself in order to clear him from being a suspect and to throw police off their track. Police also looked at the verbiage being used in that specific text message and compared it to other text messages that Danielle had sent, and there were several things that were just off. The verbiage that was being used, the punctuation, the text that Danielle, quote unquote, sent to Stewart was using all capital letters. The whole thing was in all caps, and that is just not how Danielle would typically type. Police also recalled when Stewart was initially interviewed by police, he had asked authorities if there was any way that they could trace Danielle's phone to figure out where she was, and police said yes. And then 30 minutes after that meeting, 30 minutes after Stewart had left that initial questioning, Danielle's phone was turned off for good. So again, just more and more suspicious behavior was coming forward. Now, it was 2 months into this investigation that the first piece of solid physical evidence came forward. I had mentioned earlier that police had discovered a green duffel bag in Stewart's attic of his home, and along with the items that I had previously listed, police also discovered a pair of ivory-colored tights. On those ivory-colored tights, there was a small drop of blood on those tights, and police were able to send those tights to the forensics lab to examine the blood, and that blood on those tights came back as a match to have both Danielle and Stewart's DNA on them. And when that DNA was confirmed, this was huge in this case because this was the first piece of physical evidence that police finally had, and Stewart was arrested again on August 17th of 2001, and now he was being charged with Danielle's abduction and her murder. Police were very confident at this point that sadly they did not believe that when they found Danielle, she would be alive. They believed that Danielle had been murdered, and they believed that Stewart was the one who did it. But with Stewart's arrest, there was still a massive question at play, which was, where was Danielle? Her body still was not discovered. And getting a murder conviction without a body, as we know, is difficult. We have said this time and time again here on this podcast. It is difficult to get a murder conviction without a body. It's not impossible, but it is difficult. Stewart pled not guilty to Danielle's abduction and her murder, and the trial was set to begin on October 14th, 2002. Now, the prosecution presented a case that argued that Stewart was a pedophile. He was a pedophile and he was obsessed with his niece Danielle. The prosecution used the physical evidence on the tights, the witnesses seeing a girl matching Danielle's description talking to a man who matched Stewart's description. They talked about Stewart's planner and all of the other suspicious behavior, the text messages, the other items found in the duffel bag, the bizarre photography business called Cinderella's. It was all brought out in this trial. Now, the defense argued that the evidence was purely circumstantial and that the DNA proved that an uncle had a piece of his clothing from his niece. They said that this could have been left there under any circumstance. Maybe she just left it at his house by accident. And they tried to explain that there was nothing suspicious about it, but then it was time for the jury to decide. And after deliberating for 2 days, the jury found Stewart Campbell guilty on the charges of abduction and murder of his niece, Danielle Jones, on December 19th, 2002. Those in the courtroom said that Stewart, when this verdict was read, he was completely stone cold. Stewart was sentenced to life in prison along with 10 years for the abduction, and Stewart was considered for parole in November of 2022. However, in January 2023, his parole was denied. Now, while Danielle's family has a verdict, there is some sort of justice that is found in this case. There are still, like I said in the very beginning, so many unanswered questions because where is Danielle? To this day, her body has not been recovered. She has not been found, and we don't know what happened to her. Where did Stewart take Danielle? Where is her body? What happened on June 18th? We still have so many unanswered questions pertaining to this case, and for Danielle's family's sake, I hope that they are able to get the answers that they deserve and they are able to locate Danielle and bring her home. I'm so curious to hear what you guys have to say about this case. I have a lot of opinions on it, but I'm really curious to know what you guys think. So please let me know in the comments below. And with that being said, you guys, that is going to be all for me today. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode here of Killer Instinct. Again, before you leave, make sure you go ahead, hit that subscribe button. That way you never miss an episode. We post weekly here on the podcast, like I mentioned, every single Wednesday. You're not going to want to miss it. We also upload the video version onto YouTube on Wednesdays as well. The links to the Patreon will always be in the description box below for you guys to go check out. I'll be back next week with a brand new one for you guys. And until then, stay safe. Bye, guys.